You don't wake up one day and decide to choose yourself. You wake up exhausted from betraying yourself for years. I'm going to speak to you not as an enemy, not as someone judging you, but as a woman who has spent her life listening to men tell the truth only when they feel safe enough to stop pretending. And here is the first truth most men never hear: your life didn't stall because you weren't good enough. It stalled because you kept abandoning yourself to earn approval that was never meant to save you. From the outside, you look functional. You work, you show up, you keep the wheels turning, but inside, there's a quiet resentment building, not toward women, not toward society, but toward yourself. Because deep down, you know how many times you said yes when your body was screaming no, how many times you shrank your standards, softened your boundaries, or swallowed your instincts just to avoid being alone, rejected, or misunderstood. As a psychologist, I've watched men confuse self sacrifice with strength. You were taught that being needed makes you valuable, that being agreeable makes you lovable, that being silent makes you safe. No one warned you that this slow erosion of self would eventually turn into anger, numbness, or a life that feels like it belongs to someone else. Here's what's uncomfortable: people didn't take advantage of you because they're evil, they did it because you trained them to. Every time you overgave without being asked, every time you stayed when your respect was leaking out, every time you mistook potential for reality and hoped someone would change if you loved them harder. The day a man chooses himself doesn't look dramatic at first. There's no applause, no sudden glow up montage. It starts with something much quieter, a moment of internal honesty so sharp it hurts, a moment where you realize you're tired of negotiating your worth, tired of chasing chemistry that costs you your peace, tired of being the good guy who is never fully chosen, only conveniently kept. This is where fear shows up, because choosing yourself means you will disappoint people who benefited from your silence. It means some connections won't survive. It means you'll feel selfish before you feel free. And your nervous system, conditioned by years of people pleasing, will panic and tell you you're making a mistake. But listen closely. That panic isn't danger, it's withdrawal. You're withdrawing from a version of yourself that was built to survive, not to thrive. Men often ask me when life finally changes. It changes the moment you stop asking, "How do I keep this?" and start asking, "Why am I tolerating this?" That single shift reorders your entire psychology. You stop chasing validation and start generating gravity. You stop auditioning for love and start screening for alignment. Choosing yourself is not about becoming cold, cruel, or closed off. It's about becoming anchored. And once a man is anchored, everything around him responds differently: his relationships, his confidence, his direction. Not because he demanded respect, but because he finally stopped abandoning it. This is the beginning. And beginnings are rarely loud, but they are irreversible. Once a man chooses himself, the world doesn't immediately reward him, it tests him. This is where most men turn back. Because the moment you stop over explaining, stop over giving, stop chasing, people notice. Some lean in closer, confused by the shift. Others pull away, offended that you no longer bend. And a part of you will wonder if you made the wrong move, because for the first time, your worth isn't being measured by how useful you are. Let me tell you something most men don't hear from women, especially not from psychologists. Attraction is not created by effort alone. It's created by self-respect that doesn't ask for permission. When you choose yourself, your energy changes before your behavior does. Your voice steadies. Your reactions slow down. You stop trying to control outcomes and start observing patterns. That's when clarity hits. Men often confuse intensity with intimacy. You thought loving harder would fix the disconnect. You thought explaining your intentions would earn understanding. But what actually happens is the opposite. The more you overextend, the less you're felt. Not because you lack value, but because value that's always available becomes invisible. Choosing yourself forces you to sit with loneliness instead of escaping it through attention, situationships, or emotional labor. And yes, that loneliness can sting, but it's clean pain, not corrosive pain. It doesn't hollow you out. It rebuilds you. It teaches you the difference between being alone and being abandoned. One is a state, the other is a wound. This is also the moment you stop romanticizing potential. You stop falling in love with who someone could be if they healed, tried harder, or finally saw you. You start looking at how they show up when it matters. Consistency becomes more attractive than chemistry. Peace becomes more seductive than passion that keeps you anxious. And here's the psychological shift that changes everything. When you choose yourself, rejection loses its power. Not because it stops happening, but because it stops defining you. You no longer personalize disinterest. You don't chase closure. You don't argue your case. You recognize misalignment without turning it into a verdict on your worth. This is why some people will accuse you of changing. What they mean is you stopped performing the role that made them comfortable. You stopped absorbing emotional weight that wasn't yours. You stopped confusing patience with self-erasure. As a woman, I can tell you this plainly. A man who has chosen himself is felt immediately. Not because he's louder or dominant, but because he's grounded. He doesn't rush intimacy. He doesn't fear silence. He listens without losing himself. That steadiness signals safety, and safety is magnetic. But this phase requires restraint. You will feel the urge to prove that you're still kind, still generous, still worthy. Resist it. True self-worth doesn't announce itself. It enforces itself quietly through boundaries, through standards, through the willingness to walk away from what costs you your center. Life starts responding differently here. Opportunities appear because you're no longer scattered. Relationships deepen because you're no longer overinvested. And the most important relationship, the one you have with yourself, finally stops feeling like a negotiation. This is not the end of the test, it's the refinement. There is a moment every man reaches after choosing himself where the noise fades. And what's left is responsibility. Not the kind you were taught growing up, not duty, not sacrifice, not carrying everyone else's emotional weight. I'm talking about ownership, the uncomfortable realization that once you stop blaming circumstances, partners, timing, or bad luck, you are face to face with your own patterns. And that moment can feel heavier than heartbreak. Because now, you can't unsee it. You start noticing how often you ignored red flags because you wanted to be chosen, how you stayed agreeable to avoid conflict, how you outsourced your self-esteem to attention, sex, or being needed. This isn't shame, it's awakening. And awakening rarely feels good at first. Men tell me they're afraid that choosing themselves will make them selfish or emotionally unavailable. What actually happens is the opposite. You become selective. And selectivity is not cruelty, it's clarity. You stop giving access to people who don't respect your time, energy, or direction. You stop negotiating boundaries that should never have been debated. Here's something critical. Once a man chooses himself, he becomes dangerous to dysfunction. Chaos can no longer feed on him. Emotional manipulation stops working. Push-pull dynamics lose their grip because he no longer needs to win someone over to feel whole. This is where masculine confidence is rebuilt correctly, not through dominance, but through self-trust. You begin trusting your instincts again. If something feels off, you don't rationalize it away. If someone shows inconsistency, you don't chase clarity, you accept the data and move accordingly. And this is the part that quietly terrifies people around you. Not because you're cold, but because you're no longer predictable. You don't overreact. You don't overpursue. You don't collapse when someone withdraws. That emotional steadiness forces others to confront their own instability. Choosing yourself also reshapes how you love. You stop leading with intensity and start leading with presence. You don't rush intimacy to secure attachment. You allow connection to build naturally. And because you're no longer afraid of loss, you become capable of deeper commitment, not desperate attachment. From a psychological standpoint, this is integration. Your thoughts, emotions, and actions finally align. There's no longer a split between who you are and who you pretend to be. And that alignment creates a quiet authority that can't be faked. Men often expect life to become easier after this. In some ways, it does, but it also becomes more honest. You can't numb yourself with distractions the same way. You can't tolerate mediocrity in relationships, in work, or in how you treat yourself. And here's the truth: most self improvement content won't say, once you choose yourself, you will outgrow people you genuinely care about. Not because you think you're better, but because you're no longer compatible with versions of life that require you to shrink. That grief is real. Let yourself feel it. But don't confuse grief with regret. Growth always costs something, and what it gives you in return is a life that finally feels like it's yours. This is where power stabilizes. Not loud, not flashy, but unshakable. There comes a day when a man looks around and realizes his life feels quieter, but stronger. The chaos is gone. The emotional roller coasters have flattened. The constant need to be validated, chosen, or reassured has dissolved. And for the first time, your nervous system isn't bracing for impact. It's at rest. That's when you understand something profound. Peace was never boring. It was unfamiliar. Choosing yourself doesn't turn you into someone who needs less love. It turns you into someone who refuses distorted love. You no longer confuse intensity with depth or attention with care. You recognize that real connection feels steady, not urgent, safe, not addictive, mutual, not one-sided. As a psychologist, I can tell you this is when a man's life trajectory changes permanently, not because everything becomes perfect, but because you stop building your future on emotional quicksand. Your decisions are no longer reactions to fear. They're reflections of values. Women feel this shift immediately, not because you say different things, but because you no longer leak insecurity through your actions. You're not trying to impress, you're not trying to be needed, you're not bargaining for affection. You show up as yourself, and that authenticity filters everything. Some will walk away. The right ones won't need convincing. And here's the part that completes the transformation. You stop asking, "Am I enough?" That question only exists when your worth is conditional. When you choose yourself, worth becomes the starting point, not the reward. You still grow, you still improve, but not to be accepted, to be aligned. This is why men who choose themselves age differently. They carry less resentment, less suppressed anger, less regret. They become men who are respected not because they demand it, but because they embody it. Their presence calms rooms. Their absence is felt. Their boundaries are trusted. You also become accountable in a way most people avoid. When something fails, you don't spiral into self-attack or external blame. You assess, you adjust, you move forward. That resilience becomes your real confidence. And the life that emerges from this, it's not louder, it's cleaner. Your relationships simplify, your goals sharpen, your standards rise. You stop chasing highs and start building foundations, and foundations last. So let me ask you something deeply personal, and answer honestly in the comments. If you measured your life today by how often you abandon yourself to keep others comfortable, what number would you give it? From 1 to 10. Write the number. Don't explain it. Just own it. If this spoke to you, like the video so it reaches more men who need to hear this. Subscribe for deeper conversations about self-respect, relationships, and psychology. And share this with one man in your life who's tired of losing himself trying to be chosen. The day a man chooses himself isn't loud, but everything after it is real.